Welcome back to the Recast and Reloaded show, and Happy New Year. And I'll tell you what a way to start, because on this episode, we have a close friend of ours, Jackson Hall. At such a young age, Jackson discovered a different way to break the surface when it came to being an effective outdoorsman. You'll hear all about Jackson's holistic outlook on the outdoors, him catching a once-in-a-lifetime fish, to rediscovering your true nature through nature itself. Been fishing and hunting since birth, but I think we're going to talk more fishing because I see Jackson now kind of utilizing fishing as something for more of a personal place to go and fish. I don't know, what would you say about that, Jackson? Like for you, where you started fishing, how do you look at fishing now compared to how you did whenever you first started?
Yeah, when I first started fishing compared to now, definitely a lot has changed. If I think about the first time like I ever touched a fishing rod, it just takes me back to a house I lived in, actually down the road from here where we're recording this, and it was like a little SpongeBob fishing rod. And I think I had the little plastic piece on it tied on there that doesn't have a hook, but you don't know that, so you think every cast you're ready to just hook a freaking big one, and little do you know until like a year later, like your dad's just got you set up with a decoy. Just this little.
You're expecting a sturgeon to bite, but
yeah, and there actually is a funny story about that that's now coming to my mind that I forgot about, because my dad, my grandfather, my uncle, they grew up fishing on Lake Fork, and we were out on the pontoon boat one time, and I had that same little rod, and it was like a little yellow perch looking thing. It's just plastic. Yeah. And I remember a fish was holding onto that thing like it was, and I was like, I got one. And it came up to the side of the boat, and it was a good sized bass. At the time, I thought it was like a 10-pounder, and I was little, like, world record. But it just had that thing stuck, and I was like, and then it came out, I was like, oh, there's no hook in there. Yeah. But so from an obvious standpoint, I use hooks on my baits now. The first time, it's like, but really growing up fishing, it was just kind of became something that was so natural and second nature to me. I would always beg my dad to just grab the tackle box and go behind the house. I didn't really get to go that often when I was a kid, but did a lot of more hunting when I was younger. But then, as I got older, I think when I first started fishing more serious, hitting the ponds around the local communities and stuff, was probably around 5th grade. There's some different creek systems and stuff here in Arlington, Texas, where we live, that I began fishing with a couple buddies of mine. And
that's always where it seems to have started for most of the people we talk to, and it's always in the creeks.
Oh yeah, Brush Creek.
Brush Creek.
That's the one right there.
I mean, even just going down to like the Trinity River here in the Metroplex, but.
Have mom drop you off in the morning and dad pick you up on his way home from work.
Yeah. I guess, and that's the thing too, when in 5th grade, my family moved to this property. We had a pond, and then a neighbor's had a pond, and then there was 2 different creeks intersecting, probably, a little under a quarter-mile stretch of Rush Creek ran through that too, and then we would just run that for miles in either direction, and that's when I really started to see fish in their natural habitat and understand really the inner workings of like bass biology and like what was happening in the environment, like the creeks and the ponds, because that's when I got a pond. So it was no longer like a pond I was just visiting. It was like, you're gifted your own pond. I mean, as a kid, as a fisherman, the ideas just start, going wild. I'm sitting in class, instead of learning, I'm drawing up how I should design my pond. Oh, I need to put a brush pile here. I need to put some rocks over here for the crawdad. So I guess then I started looking at how it started to become a lot more than just fishing and like catching a fish, and more about like how I could set myself up in a position to catch more fish and to like help build healthier populations of fish.
Because isn't that what you wanted to go to college for too?
Yeah, when
originally.
I was a kid, like I wanted to be like a fisheries biologist, you know, and like do that full time one day. I really, just fell in love with the process and learning to understand it all. I actually went to a few camps with Texas Brigades, if anyone is familiar with that program. Wonderful youth program. Definitely check it out if you've never heard of it. There's also opportunities for adults to become mentors for the kids too. So it can be for all ages, and it's an incredible thing. I think they call it a fisheries or wildlife biology degree in 7 days. You wake up at like 5 a.m. and you study till like midnight. And so,
well, that doesn't sound terrible. That sounds like a pretty good 7 days.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a lot of learning, but it's cool. And they have. I went to the bass one in like. I think I went to the bass one in like 2010 or 2011.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And really learned a lot more about that. And met people in the industry, because at the time it was like what I wanted to do. So it was like, hey, let me hear from people that are in this in the day to day.
Yeah.
They do it. They've been to school. A&M was like the big school to go to for that. So it was all like, I was really wanting to do that. But, back to just like how I was designing this pond and fishing this pond all the time and stocking fish from lakes and in the creek, and that's really where I fell in love with like so much more than just cast to catch.
Yeah, because I remember fishing Oak Trail Court, and it wasn't just going to catch a fish anymore in that place. It was, we would get done with school and go roll moss for hours because we wanted to minimize that sort of foliage and their ecosystem, and that's what we all what ended up happening a lot more was like, okay, we're gonna go catch some crawdads, stock the tank. We're gonna go fish here, bring fish back to the tank, and that was always so cool, just being able to do so much more than just go and fish. It was like we could see these fish grow.
Yeah.
So for you, it kind of went from like a place of reel and catch, like you said, to conservationism and almost a botany approach.
Yeah.
Of just circling it back that whole time.
Yeah, it was like, I like catching fish, and my friends like catching fish, so let's make my pond the best setup to catch fish, and like create abundance of opportunity, and that always circles back to conservation first, whether you're talking hunting or fishing. And that's why it all goes back to the environments that you're watering. How are you treating your land, and how are you managing that for whatever species you're hunting, be that quail, whitetail, pronghorn, elk, and for fishing, whether that be bass, catfish, bluegill, just creating those ecosystems that complement species that allows the ecosystem to thrive symbiotically.
And that's what a lot of people forget sometimes whenever you, and this definitely comes later on whenever you're fishing and hunting, like what happened with you, is you start to realize that you're going into a different world to go and catch a fish, and you're taking that fish out of its world. And whenever you really sit there and look at it as a whole, like holistically, is like, okay, I'm going to throw this bait on this bed, and I want it to look like whatever it is, like a injured crawdad, injured bluegill, and it needs to look like a Big Mac to us sometimes, and you really start to think about it.
Oh yeah.
And it's just a cool thought whenever they bite, and then you work that fish on a bed for an hour, and then
He's like, I just did that.
Yeah,
I just folded in it.
Yeah. Well, and the reason like I kind of bring up bed fishing is I was looking back on your PK first bedfish story that you sent me. So I asked Jackson to send me a story of a fish, and for the people that follow us on Instagram, that's what our Instagram comes from, is other people's experiences, and they kind of just throw together a story and break the surface of rather than just us posting a picture of a fish. It's like, okay, what really happened? Or shooting a deer, what
Give
really
us the
happened?
real rundown.
Yeah, give us the rundown. And I asked Jackson, I'm like, hey, can you send me a quick rundown on a fish you caught? And he goes, oh, I have the perfect one. Sends me a 5-page Word document. And I mean, I couldn't post that, but I'll probably link that to the podcast here today, because it is phenomenal how in-depth Jackson goes on what it took to catch that fish and the sequences leading up to it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I mean, that's an outline of the outlines.
yeah,
If Instagram allowed it to be that long, it would be perfect.
yeah.
It would be perfect, but just
what-
the way it is.
Yeah, and then
Mhm.
that's why I was super excited to have Jackson come and talk about his experiences in fishing and the outdoors, because not a lot of people look at it the way you do. And that's a lot of things in our personal lives and business lives. You just have a different mindset when it comes to things.
Has your mindset changed throughout the years of the way you look at hunting and fishing?
Oh yeah, it's always evolving, you know, and that's something that I go back to. You know, the bass are evolving, we're evolving. You know, we're always getting smarter and figuring out ways to. The bass are figuring out ways to constantly avoid being caught. We're constantly figuring out ways to catch them, and same with deer. You know, it's like we're in this constant cat and mouse game, but when you really think about it at its deepest level as humans, like we are really just in this game with nature, that we come from the same soils that these animals, in the same waters that these fish swim in. So it's like it brings you honestly back to like an ancestral place within your being, that you are actively engaging in something that has been done for hundreds of thousands of years.
100%.
But now we just get to use live scope.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot more science to it.
Yeah.
Now, you know, we're not
Yeah.
going out with a spear, and we're not just using little nets woven out of string to catch these fish.
But sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And
It's perfectly
Well,
awesome.
that's like a primal experience.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, feels good. I
And
mean,
yeah, to go back to those methods is cool too. Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah, you see those guys that go out and they're catching fish the way people overseas catch fish and stuff like that. It's just a whole different ball game. Like using just a
yeah.
like cane pole and a piece of string, you
Yeah.
know.
I think that's
Like
that's one of the biggest things I think that's evolved in my mindset in general, but especially like fishing, is that like you can make it as complex as you want it, but then eventually you come back around to the simplicity of like throwing a damn spinner bait and it being like the best bait. It's like
Yeah.
so often you can catch yourself getting sold. That's what fishing lures are meant to do. That's what these industries are built on, is selling a hunter or fisherman a product. Nothing against the companies and the marketing psychology behind that. That's awesome. But really at the end of the day, you just need the basics. You know,
Yeah.
it's like you don't have to have some crazy camo that, you know, makes you invisible or something and puts out a certain odor. You know,
Yeah.
it could just be that old pair of overalls that your grandpa handed down to you.
and if
hey
you
man.
and if you look at the camos right now, it's been a full circle. Now the
the old
the-
40s
the-
duck camos
yeah.
coming back around.
Yeah.
the trending camo.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it works.
Yeah.
I think there's something to say about the mojo behind the gear you're using, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, I know there's those guys out there that, and I even have some of the same things in my arsenal of like, you still have that one rod that's got cork falling off of it just because it's your lucky rod. And you're going to use that thing till it wears out.
Well, you look at fishermen in general, even professionals and just your day-to-day weekend angler, each boat or each person has their bait. I mean, for me, Jackson, what is it? Hag's Tornado.
Hag's Tornado.
Trophy hunter. T-rig, I'll throw that year-round. I'll always have that tied on, or a popper. Lake Fork Trophy Lures, Yellow Magic. And you can look at the pros like Dean Rojas, he's a frog. I mean, Skeet Reese, just look at those guys. But it all comes back to simplicity, like you said, and confidence.
Yeah.
But One thing that didn't seem so simple that you did recently was your Hawaii trip
Yeah.
on the Bonefish trip
Yeah.
with the fly. What would you say about that trip? How was that? Probably one of the hardest fish you've caught,
I would say that overall,
or was it as simple?
Experience
Or
was-
was it simple? I mean,
it was definitely hard. It was a difficult thing because, a buddy of mine invited me down to go bone fishing in Hawaii, and I did a little bit of research, and basically all the research I did prior to going into this trip was like, Hawaiian bonefish are the hardest bonefish to catch in the world. You have to be an elite fly fishing angler. You have to have a guide. Like, you will not catch a fish if you do not have a guide, or you are not really, really dialed on your fly fishing. And I'm just like, oh, it's just a bonefish, and there's a lot of them. Like, surely if I put my fly in front of them enough times in 5 days of fishing, like, I'll catch one of these things. Like, I know enough about fish. I've lived and breathed this my whole life. I can quickly pick up on the hints, but after like 3 days, and I haven't even hooked one of these things, nor has my buddy that has been fly fishing for years. We were really getting down on ourselves. Like, you would like see one of these bonefish, maybe like tailing 75 yards from you, and you'd be like, oh, there's one. And as soon as you see that tail, like, you got to start walking in like ankle to knee deep water, but you got to move slow. And during that process, like, you might lose sight of that fish and he might be gone and another one might pop up. So you're constantly attuned to your environment. Like, you are really looking for these tails. And, you do all that, especially if it's a big one and you really don't want to blow it. Like, you're stalking these flats to approach these bonefish in the right way. And obviously I didn't know how to exactly approach these, but I knew, probably quietly, right?
Yeah.
But I've heard, and I may get the exact fact on this wrong, but like a big bonefish that's like mature can sense you from like a half mile away or something. Like,
Holy
like if you're
that's
on the
insane.
flat, like, chances are the big bonefish
already knows you're
like
there.
they can sense like through their like, and that's crazy. So it's like. And from what I heard from some Hawaiian guys we talked to, like, the bonefish in Hawaii are like just stupid smart. Like, if you go elsewhere, like, they're usually easier to catch. And granted, we tried, and we woke up every morning. We were at the crack of dawn. We kayaked like half mile out to these flats. It was awesome getting to learn these fish and finally starting to put clues together as to like, okay, what are they eating? How can we replicate that? What's the best method to try to hook one of these things? And we eventually discovered that there was a whole nother flat, like, that we didn't even fish the first 3 days, or the first 2 days, I guess. And the third day we went to that flat and we walked up on it. We pulled our kayaks up on this like coral, like this rocky coral shelf that dropped off to like 90 foot on one side, and then it was like less than a foot on the top, and there was like an old sailboat kind of like falling over right there. It was really cool, and the wind was kind of blowing right across it onto like this massive flat. And turns out this flat is like, I don't even know how big, like maybe like 20 football fields or something. It's a huge
That's
flat.
a big flat.
Like, the other flats
Massive.
are dwarfed by the size of this flat, and we were like, we didn't even know this one was here.
Yeah.
And so we rolled up on that and we started walking, and we started seeing like 5 to 7 pound bonefish like left and right. Like,
And
these are giant.
what's a big bonefish?
Yeah, like, I think like a really big bonefish is probably 3 pounds plus. Like, if you were to compare it to bass, and I mean, I'm not the fly expert here.
Yeah.
All I'm speaking from is just from what I've heard from guys. So if I get this wrong, don't come at me for it. It's like a 6 or 7 pound bonefish is your equivalent to like a teener for largemouth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, you're seeing world class fish, and
Yeah.
we saw a bonefish that was probably 12 to 14 pounds.
Oh my!
It looked like a
Lord.
tarpon.
Yeah.
It looked like a tarpon.
moly.
And I saw it like 3 foot from me, and I said, was that a bonefish to my buddy? And then he was like, I didn't see it. And then he saw it later, and he was like, I saw a 14-pound bonefish. And apparently, the world record bonefish was caught on that flat, and it's like 14 pounds if you look it up. Like, and it was caught on that flat in Honolulu. It's called the Triangle Flats.
I'm curious. I'd imagine that those like fish take up residency there. They don't leave. There wouldn't be because they're flat fish.
They live there. They come. The reason why I think there's so many big ones there is because the deep water's right there, and they come up and feed, and then they drop back down. So what I did figure out toward the end when I started putting some things together was that on a really high tide, it was hard to locate fish. Like, you could see them. They had so much more water to roam, and you were dredging more water. It took longer to get around. One evening I was in one spot, and there was like probably 7 bonefish around me, all record size, like 6-7 pound bonefish. Couldn't catch any of them, and it was too dark to really see where I was presenting my fly, but it was just crazy. I was like letting it soak in. I was like, I'm surrounded by all these like record sized bonefish. I can't catch one, but it's pretty cool. Like, their tails are like rising out of the water, and because they're just digging around in the mud. What they feed on, because these are mud flats predominantly, with mangroves, but the mangroves have been cut by the FAA because it's next to the airport in Honolulu, and the birds were roosting in it. So the birds were causing potential problems for planes, right? So they cut all the mangroves. So in the videos you watch a lot of times of these flats, there's mangroves, but now they're all cut, which is kind of sad. There's one flat that has a little bit of them. So I know that probably is not helping like with the health of the fishery right there. But anyway, there's a bunch of big ones there. They eat crabs. Like, I heard down in like Cozumel or something, they're eating shrimp. So I bought like $140 worth of shrimp flies, and they do not like this. And literally, I go to the fly shop, and the guy at the fly shop tells me, he goes, literally, they want something drab here. Drab, like just no color. He's no color, no sparkles, no nothing, just drab and small. And I was like any of these? He's like, no. Like, all of those, the fish will run the opposite direction of these flies here. And I was like, well, I've been throwing that one for 2 days. Let's not throw that one.
Totally.
So once we kind of learned that, we were like, okay, that makes sense. And he was like even talking about coloring the hooks and stuff, because these bonefish, especially the bigger ones, they've been caught before, and they've even been like, people go out there and like spear them and stuff, I think. So these bonefish are spooky, but they'll like study your fly. Like, they know, they can really tell the difference.
I've heard that if you feel the bite, you're already too late.
Yeah, that's
is that a fact, or was it?
I can't prove that because I'm not that.
Well, you did. So you did catch one.
Yes. Yeah, let's get to that. So I did catch.
I was looking forward to that.
I did catch one. On the 3rd day, we were walking down the edge of the big flat we found, and it was on a falling tide. So on the falling tide, all the water that was up in the dead mangroves and stuff, and on the flat, all the bonefish started pushing out to deeper water. So when you're walking, it's like fish are just funneling. It's like fishing a bridge if you're bass fishing, like a funnel, like in the creek in the pre-spawn. Like, so the fish are coming to us. So actively from our left off the flat to the right, where the deep water is, there's just new fish popping up. Like, and we were just walking this flat, and we have our polarized glasses and like we're like really dialed in with our hoods up and everything, and so we're just watching to see. And we were even having these bonefish like swimming directly at us. So you'd see one, and like we'd choose who would present it. Like, oh, if you spot it, you get to present it. So I saw one, and like I think my buddy was trying to throw at another one, but I saw this, and he wasn't a huge one, but he was a decent one, and he was coming at me, and like I just dropped this little fly right there in front of him, and I mean, we're talking 3rd day. I've done this so many times. At this point, I'm hopeless. Like, I'll never get one of these things to bite. And this thing just noses right down on it and just sucks it up. And then I'm just like, and then it's like, out into the deep water. And I'm just like, rod tip up. Like, I'm like holding this. I'm running toward the edge because this coral is so sharp along this edge. And it's just like, and that's what they do when you hook them. They run. And this wasn't even really that big of one. I mean, I think he was maybe 16, 17 inches long and still just zipping you. So I think they're the fastest fish in the world, if I'm not mistaken, or at least flats fish.
That's awesome.
Next to like the wahoo.
Ridiculous.
But so we hooked one and we both got so hyped because this was 3 days of dawn till dusk on these flats trying to figure out these bonefish. So at the end of the day, you know, I caught a bonefish without a guide on my first ever ocean, like saltwater fly fishing trip on a 8-weight, never having thrown an 8-weight before. So I'm pretty happy with the outcome. I got one.
Yeah.
You know, and now if I go to Cozumel, apparently I'll be spoiled because it's not as difficult as Hawaii.
Would you say that's your most rewarding fishing experience? Or do you have anything else that kind of tops that?
That was a fun trip, all in all. And that was definitely a very rewarding experience. I'm trying to think. There's definitely been a lot of
Fish in the boat.
I mean, in terms of probably the most work I've had to do for a fish to earn a fish, definitely that trip.
Yeah.
So whenever, because your buddy you keep talking about is Troy Stewart,
Yeah.
TS Outdoors. Whenever he came to you and said, "Hey, you want to go bone fishing in Hawaii?" Was it pretty simple to go do that, or like just the planning to get to Hawaii to bonefish? Obviously, the hard part was catching the bonefish, but what did that look like for y'all? What is licensing in Hawaii look like?
Do you have to have a license?
If I'm not mistaken, I don't think you have to have a license, but I don't want to be on the. I mean, I don't. I looked it up, but I think it was one of those things like we looked it up and we were like, "Oh, it's like you don't." And I say that just because I don't remember carrying anything on me that like showed my licensing, and I could be wrong on that one detail there. And this was on Honolulu. This was Honolulu, the island of Oahu.
But if you have to have a fishing license, you actually didn't catch that bonefish, did you?
I mean, it's in the past now. But, you know, overall, it was, you know, the flight over there, pretty long flight. The flight is the pricier side. You know, if you don't have any of the fly fishing gear, that got a little pricey too. I didn't have an 8-weight. I didn't have a reel. But I made a good investment, and I'll have it for my life.
Yeah, that's one of those incurred costs where you really don't have to do it again.
Did you have to ship it?
Did you? No, we carried it on. You carry like a little tube, and then just put your reel in like your bag and carry on. You know, we got like a little Airbnb thing. I think we learned a lesson about that. I mean, we were trying to do it budget, but there was like a parking garage, and we didn't know you had to pay for the parking garage, and that ended up being really expensive. So it was like a really cheap place, but hey, you got to park in the parking garage, and this is how much you have to pay. It was like $200+, and we had 2 kayaks in the back. And that was funny because we had to run to the other side of the island the day we got there and buy like a little we got to this hardware store like with 5 minutes left, and we were like, we need to make like a lock, you know, like a bike lock for our kayaks, and like the bike locks they had wouldn't work. So we literally fabricated one out of steel cabling and crimps, and then bought like a master lock. And the guy Jim at the hardware store in Hawaii, he was like, here's the locks, and I picked out the smallest, cheapest lock. It's like $2.99, and he goes, "That one, really?" I'm like, "Jim, like we're here for like 5 days." He was like, "But there's all these better, bigger locks. Like, why this tiny one?" I was like, "Dude, this is what we gotta do, Jim." Yeah. So we got that lock, got our kayaks locked up, and we were good to go.
Yeah. So then after that is like just getting there, Airbnb, renting a vehicle.
Yeah, renting a vehicle.
Got the yaks, and at that point you're just fishing for 5 days.
Did y'all wing it, or did y'all have that all planned out?
No, we had it planned out.
Oh, okay.
And Troy's pretty good at getting that all planned out. I picked up I Ubered from the airport straight to pick up the car. We had like a little Tacoma truck, and it was perfect for hauling around the yaks. And you know, on a trip like that, or any of these type of traveling experiences, I've done a fair amount of them, but not a ton. But it's just, you know, know that things are probably not going to go exactly as planned always, and just like understand that like things will work out, and like you'll find the answer, or like
Improvise.
the right person will show up to like help you along in the way. Like don't overthink it, don't overstress it.
They'll show you not to throw them sparkly flies at this bonefish.
Yeah, always be picking up any clues that people drop down for you.
Yeah. Well, it's like, to that point too, I mean, use your resources that when people already know what to do on what you're trying to do. And that's with anything, is just, it's not,
Word of mouth.
yeah, just, I mean, most people already know how to build the clock, just let them tell you the time. I use that analogy a lot. And just, all you gotta do is just ask. Worst thing they can do is say no, or, well, start saying that, but then again, you get into dock talk and tournaments.
Yeah.
Could be a
I
little
think
worse.
that's dock talk is kind of a different deal than going to a place that's new, hunting and fishing. You need to pick up some you need to pick up some knowledge, versus, just, you got a tournament on a lake and you're going down and talking to the guy that just pulled up. I think there's two differences there for information. But definitely when you're in those experiences, like where you actively are really searching authentically for information, and you ask someone with that authenticity, it's like, just humble yourself and just listen to what they tell you. It's like you could be an expert in that, and there's always, the best hunters and fishermen, like, they're always constantly learning. They're like a sponge, and they're constantly listening to what's going on around them. They don't always take it as truth until they test it, but they're always asking. Their ears are always open to hearing what people are talking about around them, because you never know when that little nugget of information could come in, or you just hear something and it helps you put a puzzle piece in place on your board that you've been looking for years, or maybe you've been close to, but that person says one thing and it's like, that makes sense. I've thought the same thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at professionals like top of the line meat eater, for instance. I mean, if there's one person that probably knows more about hunting or fishing than anybody, it's probably him. But he's not done yet. I mean, there's a reason he's has 1,000 podcasts, 1,000 TV shows. There's never a cap to how you evolve in the outdoor realm.
No, I think
millions.
Cross applies to anyone, even myself. Like getting into this later in life, obviously. I mean, going duck hunting with Troy last week, not even a week ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I've probably learned 100 things in a 5-hour time span, and it's just like you just grow. It's a snowball. It just keeps rolling and rolling, and it's
Growth.
Yeah, like you're saying, even from me starting nowhere, people lower than me, up to Stephen Renella. It's just constant, continuous growth, and I feel like that's something rewarding in this sphere that a lot of people outside of it don't really recognize. That's drawn me into it a lot more. I feel like you would obviously agree.
Yeah, I love
100%.
that, and I love that. Yeah, you noticed that, and it's all about like the growth mindset, and continually like, because nature has so much more to teach us than we can learn in books and in science. It's like being out in nature, on the lake or in the woods, and it's never been about hunting and fishing. It's always been about getting back to our roots, like in the land, and back to nature and
Experience.
experience in the outdoors, baby.
Exactly.
That's what I'm talking about.
Well, I guess that kind of leads into another thing that you're doing now in your life. So, hunted since birth, took the fishing route collegiately on a tournament scale. Me and you fished together, and now with what you do now, if you want to explain what you do now with Live Thrivingly podcast, how do you think where you're at now with that kind of piggybacked off of maybe fishing in the outdoors and looking at things on a different vision than we would typically?
I think there's a lot of like commonalities in like what I'm really doing with my work at the moment now, with my podcast and brand that I'm kind of building up called Live Thrivingly, with really a focus on holistic lifestyle and just accessing greater potentials for ourselves, and that I believe we can all unlock greater potentials within ourselves, and like it's our birthright to do that. And Live Thrivingly's mission is really about helping people uncover those. And I think coming from my hunting and fishing background and that constant growth mindset as a kid, and just constantly seeking to sponge up more and see things from a different angle, but also just being in nature. Because my logo for Live Thrivingly is a banyan tree, and a banyan tree, they grow thousands of years old and have all these root systems coming down. So there's so many aspects of the banyan tree, and it becomes this wise tree. And with hunting and fishing, it's like being in nature and really like learning that there's a language beyond words that you're getting from animals and from the plants, from the trees, from even the rocks and everything around you in these environments you're in, that teach you something about yourself as a human being that you don't learn in school. They don't teach this in growing up in elementary school and stuff, in lower education. They don't teach this in college. I mean, you can teach the theory of it all you want, but to experience it and to begin to know it and feel the sensations in your body that you're brought in the outdoors is what really, I feel like, grounds you in the fact that, you're a human being.
Well, and like coming off of that is one thing a lot of people have always heard and a lot of people have always said that is actually one of the biggest lies out there is knowledge is power. Knowledge isn't power, it's utilizing that knowledge. That's what makes you powerful. You could read, you could learn whatever it is you're trying to discover, but
the application of that knowledge.
Yeah, if you don't apply it, and that goes with Live Thrivingly and then RCRL. To an extent, we're hoping at RCRL we can let people re-experience the outdoors, and for you, it seems like you want them to rediscover themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And a method for that is getting back into nature and the outdoors in any way possible. Like for one person it might be hunting, for one person it might be fishing, for another person it might be walking outside and walking down the path in their neighborhood, and looking at the trees, hearing the birds,
taking your shoes off, and
taking your shoes off,
putting your feet in the sand,
putting your feet back in the earth, like we were meant to do, like our ancestors did. And there's a lot of wisdom to heed from that, and it's beyond the level of the mind. You don't have to overthink it. Just start trying it out and seeing the difference you feel. You wonder why these native cultures walked around with leather-soled shoes or no shoes at all. Yeah. They're very connected to the land, and this creates vitality and health within the human being, so that you're able to fend off diseases, and you're able to hunt and continue to build your tribe and continue your species on. So it's definitely all connected, and all these things can loop back.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, yeah, even piggybacking off that, everyone going through like COVID, everyone stayed inside. Yeah. Me specifically, I mean, throughout the years I'd play Call of Duty, stay inside. It's just a good time. Throw my headset on and then not have to do anything. Rolling into that, becoming more of an outdoorsman to an extent myself, and just seeing like the quality of life change of me just going out and standing on a boat for 2.5 hours compared to me sitting in a dark room with a headset screaming at people. It's night and day. Like, you just, one, it's healthier. Two, it just feels good. You feel a sense of connection to the earth. It's that primal, even that like primal feeling.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like for me going to that place, and a lot of people are still in that work from home mindset. I want to stay home. I want to do this. And you're the perfect like shining example of where you can go and like connect with that. I feel like that's just awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing that, man. And it's, on one hand, I've been the person that has worked at home too, and I spend a lot of time in like cognitive capacities and like mental, like just really working from the mind. And a lot of my work with Live Thrivingly and just, coming back down to the point of like application of knowledge, like Josh was just talking about, is like integration of knowledge. And like you can read all the books, you can listen to all the podcasts, you can, get all the degrees and the titles you want, but it's about how you're applying that knowledge into your life, about how you're applying what you're learning to be a better hunter, a better fisherman, a better friend, a better, partner,
and,
a better...
And getting past the, for lack of a better statement, like getting past the group message where, like whenever I say it like that, it's like, for a lot of our listeners, I'm sure people are going to listen to what we say, but we're not just having these conversations in hopes you're going to listen to them. Yeah, that's a plus. We hope you listen to them, but we hope that you take what we say maybe just with a grain of salt, but you go and you get into academy, you buy a rod, and you actually go fishing. Or
it inspires you to go catch bonefish.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I kind of want to catch one now. See how hard it is.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like that's the whole thing. And but like Jackson, yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's great. Y'all got any more questions before we pop the question?
I mean, I feel like piggybacking off again both what y'all just said, the constant stimuli of just everyday life. Me trying to sell a house, y'all trying to push some roofs, Hunter doing just trade work like a mother.
Anything I can get my hands on.
It's just going out there and, like I said, either being in that duck blind, just sitting on a boat, even just standing beside a pond. You can shut everything off and focus on just being in the moment. And I feel like that's really what will just start drawing a lot more people into this lifestyle once they like take a step forward and recognize what it is.
That was solid right there. Dude, that was solid.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, and I think you're so right. I think like the outdoors is such like it's the antidote for a lot of mental health problems we see in this day and age. And just even not on that, just life's tough out there, and working and all that stuff, and it's like you got to have a sanctuary, and nature's right there for you, and oftentimes it's overlooked, and just get in the nature any way you can, and
you got to find that sanctuary. I remember as a kid, I got an Xbox because everybody had an Xbox, and played games for 2 days. Figured out that was not my gig, and I sold it. I literally sold it back to GameStop. My mom took me to Cabela's. I bought a .22 long rifle. Yeah. Next day, I was shooting turtles out of a pond.
Oh, that's cool. So Jackson, whenever it comes to fishing, what's your why to get out there, start the boat, and try to go catch fish?
My why for
or just being in that water, or just being in the outdoors.
Yeah, my why for being in the outdoors has definitely shifted throughout my life. It's like the whole thing we kind of started with about just that evolution of as an outdoorsman. I would say at this moment, my why for going into the outdoors is to experience the beauty of nature and all the living plants and animals that have been put on this earth for us to experience, and actively get to see how they interact with each other, and myself included. It's like if you're ever 5 foot from a deer staring it in the eye, something different's happening in there. It's like it's a different experience, and to recognize like that getting back into the outdoors and being on the water or being in the stand or being on the side of a mountain is like taking me back to my roots as a human being. And I think that's what it it grounds me back into myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's at this point in time really what gets me back out into the outdoors.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And the past couple of times we've gone to the ranch together, recently it was always we have stuff going on. We get to the ranch, spend the time there, and then we just leave and we talk about it afterwards. Like, man, you feel cleansed. You do, and then you just get to hit a reset because you were able to ground in that kind of safe space, which is for me is sitting in a deer blind or sitting in a boat.
Yeah, and I think it's something that was overlooked when I was a kid, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But as it would be for many. I mean, you're not necessarily really pondering deep life questions a lot as a kid. You know, you're just kind of like running all around, like you know, shooting hogs and rabbits and stuff. And it's like now
squirrels
it's like,
for Dakota.
Yeah, it's like you come around. Yeah,
roadkill, baby.
You come around to this like evolution as an outdoorsman, and you're like, it's so much more philosophical, and it's like you see all the connections to it, and you recognize why you loved it so much as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like really my intentions now is to really step back into that childlike wonder and experience the outdoors as I did as a kid, instead of sitting out there wondering, oh, you know, I only have a day left, I got to go back into work, or thinking about everything that's wrong in my life in that moment, instead of getting still and realizing, like Lao Tzu says, that stillness reveals the power of eternity. And when you're in the stand in West Texas on, you know, a couple thousand acres, and it is pure stillness, and it's like 28 degrees outside, and you're sitting in the stand, I mean, you don't have to be someone that meditates to know that that is meditation. Like, it finds you, it greets you right there. Like, you might not even know that you've been doing meditation if you've been in that place, but that's the essence of meditation.
No, definitely. Man, so for some of our listeners, where can they find you, Jackson?
Yeah, so you can find me through RCRL. You can always contact Josh, Dakota, Hunter to get through to me. You can also find me Live Thrivingly on Instagram. I'm getting that social media going for my brand there. I have a podcast, the Live Thrivingly podcast. Definitely invite you to check it out. Gonna have a lot of cool content coming up soon from a lot of different perspectives and angles, and I think y'all would probably enjoy listening to some episodes, you know, if you're about, you know, improving yourself in any way, because, you know, we're all able to access greater versions of ourselves. It's not out of grasp for us. Complacency
is death.
Yeah.
Continue to grow. That's my 2023 my saying this year is the year of growth.
I mean, it's like the 13-pound bass didn't get 13 pounds by just, you know,
sitting around
figuring out just eating frogs, you know. He figured out how to eat other things. He figured out how to adapt, and I think adapt is a huge word, and we've really learned how to adapt the past 2 years, you know, with COVID and everything. And 2023 is definitely setting up as a huge year for growth. Get out there, challenge yourself, do new things, put yourself outside of your comfort zone, and learn that that's where growth happens.
What a line. What a line.